The champagne glasses shattered against the marble floor of the Riverside Country Club's grand ballroom. 200 guests fell silent as my mother, Eleanor Hartwell, stood at the microphone meant for celebrating my sister Madison's engagement. Her perfectly manicured fingers gripped a manila envelope, and her eyes locked onto mine with a look I'd never seen before. "Before we toast the happy couple," she announced, her voice carrying across the stunned crowd, "I think it's time everyone knew the truth about my eldest daughter's marriage." I felt my husband Derek's hand slip from mine as three men in expensive suits stepped forward from the crowd. Lawyers, at an engagement party. My blood turned to ice. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. 6 months earlier, I had been living what everyone called the perfect life. Cynthia Hartwell Morrison, married to Derek Morrison, the golden boy of Morrison & Associates Financial Planning. We lived in a stunning colonial house in Westchester County, complete with the white picket fence and carefully manicured garden that my mother had always dreamed of for her daughters. Every Sunday, Derek and I would drive the 45 minutes to my parents' estate in Greenwich for family dinner. The ritual never varied. We'd arrive at exactly 2 o'clock, Derek carrying flowers for my mother and a bottle of expensive wine for my father. I'd wear one of my carefully selected dresses, nothing too flashy, nothing too plain, and we'd spend 3 hours playing the part of the devoted couple. My mother, Eleanor, had built her entire social standing around her daughter's successes. She'd raised Madison and me like show ponies, grooming us for marriages that would elevate the Hartwell name in Connecticut social circles. When I married Derek 5 years ago, she practically glowed with pride at the reception. He was everything she'd wanted for me: handsome, successful, from an established family, and most importantly, he looked perfect standing next to me in photographs. The morning that would change everything started like any other Thursday. I was in my home office working on the quarterly reports for the nonprofit literacy foundation I'd started 3 years earlier. It was my passion project, something that gave my life meaning beyond the endless charity luncheons and country club events that filled my calendar. Derek had left early for a client meeting in Manhattan, kissing me goodbye with the same perfunctory peck on the cheek he'd given me every morning for the past 2 years. We'd fallen into a comfortable routine that I'd mistaken for contentment. We rarely fought, but we rarely laughed together anymore either. Our conversations had become limited to logistics: who was picking up the dry cleaning, which charity event we were attending that weekend, whether we needed to call the landscaper about the sprinkler system. I should have seen the signs: the way Derek's phone was always face down on the table during dinner, how he'd started working late 3 nights a week when he used to pride himself on leaving the office by 6, the business trips that seemed to multiply, taking him to cities where I knew his firm had no major clients. But I was good at denial. It was a skill I'd perfected over the years, smoothing over any crack that might appear in our picture-perfect facade. When Derek seemed distant, I told myself he was stressed about work. When our physical intimacy dwindled to nothing, I blamed our busy schedules. When he stopped asking about my foundation work, I convinced myself it was because he knew how passionate I was about it and didn't want to interrupt my focus. The phone call came at 11:30 that morning. The number was unfamiliar, but something compelled me to answer. "Is this Cynthia Morrison?" The voice was young, nervous, clearly rehearsed. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Jessica Chen. I'm calling because I think you should know about your husband." My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number." "Please don't hang up. Derek Morrison, right? Financial planner, drives a black BMW, has a scar on his left hand from a skiing accident when he was 12? I stared at the wedding photo on my desk. Derek's left hand was clearly visible, the small scar he'd gotten at Aspen during a family vacation, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. "What do you want?" I whispered. "I want to do the right thing. Derek and we've been seeing each other for 8 months. He told me he was divorced, that the papers were being finalized. But yesterday I saw your Christmas card on his desk at the office. You both looked so happy, and I realized..." The words hit me like physical blows. 8 months. Not a brief affair, not a moment of weakness. 8 months of lies, of him coming home to me after spending his days with her. Where? I managed to ask. The Meridian Hotel on Park Avenue, room 1247. He's there now, if you... I hung up without saying goodbye. For the next hour, I sat in my pristine kitchen staring at the granite countertops Derek and I had picked out together during our renovation 2 years ago. I'd wanted marble, but he'd insisted granite was more practical, more durable. The irony wasn't lost on me now. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't throw anything or call my sister or my mother. Instead, I did what I always done when faced with something unpleasant. I made a plan. By 2 o'clock, I was dressed in my best navy suit and standing in the lobby of the Meridian Hotel. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt like descending into a nightmare. Each floor that passed marked another layer of my life peeling away. By the time I reached 1247, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. I didn't knock. Derek had given me a key card years ago for the times when I met him at various hotels for client events or business dinners. He'd forgotten to ask for it back, and I'd forgotten I had it until that moment. The room was dimly lit, heavy curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. Derek was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in his shirt and tie, his jacket thrown over a chair. The woman, Jessica, I assumed, was standing by the window, wearing a hotel robe. She was younger than me, maybe 28, with long black hair and the kind of natural beauty that needed no makeup. Derek's face went white when he saw me. "Cynthia, I can explain." "Don't." My voice was calm, almost serene. "Just don't." Jessica had the grace to look ashamed. She grabbed her clothes from a chair and disappeared into the bathroom without a word. "How long?" I asked, though Jessica had already told me. "It's not what you think. We never meant for this to happen." "How long, Derek?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. 8 months. But Cynthia, I love you. This doesn't change anything between us. We can work through this. Couples therapy, a fresh start, whatever you want. What I want, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice, is a divorce. The word hung in the air between us like a bomb waiting to explode. "You don't mean that. Think about what people will say. Think about your family." And there it was, the real concern. Not my heart, not our marriage, not the vows we'd made. What people will say, what my family would think. "I'll pack your things," I continued. "You can pick them up tomorrow afternoon. I'll have the locks changed by evening." "Cynthia, please, we can fix this." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and realized I felt nothing. No anger, no heartbreak, no regret, just a strange sense of relief, like I'd been holding my breath for years and could finally exhale. "There's nothing to fix, Derek. There hasn't been for a long time." I left the hotel room, left my husband and his mistress, and drove home through the late afternoon traffic. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea and my laptop, researching divorce attorneys. I didn't call my mother or my sister, I didn't post anything cryptic on social media, or reach out to friends for support. This was my decision to make, my life to reclaim, and I would do it on my own terms. What I didn't know was that Derek had already made a call of his own. To his attorney, yes, but also to someone else. Someone who would turn my private decision into a very public spectacle. I should have known that a Morrison would never go down without a fight. 3 weeks had passed since I'd found Derek at the Meridian Hotel. 3 weeks of carefully orchestrated normalcy while my lawyer, Patricia Whitfield, methodically dismantled my marriage behind the scenes. Patricia was a force of nature, a 60-year-old woman who'd built her reputation destroying the careers of cheating husbands in high-profile divorces. She came highly recommended by a friend who'd gone through her own messy split the year before. "Derek's trying to delay everything," Patricia informed me during our second meeting in her Manhattan office. "His attorney filed a motion claiming you're hiding assets through your foundation. It's a stall tactic, but it's going to make this process longer than we'd hoped. I wasn't surprised. Derek had always been strategic, always thinking 3 moves ahead. He knew that a drawn-out divorce would put pressure on me to settle for less favorable terms. What he didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything for months before I'd even realized what I was doing. Every business dinner he'd claimed to attend, every weekend conference that had seemed suspicious, every credit card statement with charges I couldn't explain. Let him try, I told Patricia. I have documentation going back 2 years. Hotel charges, restaurant receipts, even photographs from social media posts that contradict his supposed business trips. Patricia smiled for the first time since I'd met her. You've been busy. I've been thorough. The hardest part wasn't dealing with the lawyers or the financial paperwork. It was maintaining the facade with my family. Derek and I had managed to keep our separation completely private. To the outside world, we were still the golden couple. He'd moved into his company's corporate apartment, telling his colleagues he was renovating our home. I'd continued attending the charity events and social functions alone, explaining his absence with work emergencies and travel commitments. But I knew the performance couldn't last much longer, especially with Madison's engagement party approaching. Madison had been planning the event for months, ever since her boyfriend Tyler Brennan had proposed during a romantic weekend in the Hamptons. Madison always did everything with flair. She was the artistic daughter, the one who'd studied fashion design in Paris and now ran her own boutique in Soho. Unlike me, Madison had never felt the pressure to marry for social status. She dated musicians and artists throughout her 20s, much to our mother's horror. Tyler was a compromise. He was a successful architect from a respectable family, creative enough to satisfy Madison's bohemian tendencies, but established enough to pass Eleanor's rigorous approval process. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was secretly filing for divorce, Madison was celebrating the beginning of her married life. The morning of the engagement party, Madison called me in a panic. "Cynthia, thank God you answered. Tyler's sister just called. She can't make it. Food poisoning. She was supposed to give a toast about their college years, and now I have no one to represent his family properly." I was sitting in my car outside Patricia's office, having just signed another round of paperwork. "What do you need me to do?" "Could you and Derek maybe say something? Just a few words about how perfect they are together, how you believe in love lasting forever, that kind of thing. You know, lead by example?" My stomach clenched. "Madison, I don't think—" "Please, Cynthia, you and Derek were like the gold standard for marriage. Everyone looks up to you two. It would mean so much to Tyler's family to hear from a couple who's made it work." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the performance I'd been maintaining for weeks pressing down on me. Of course, we'd be honored. "You're the best sister ever. I owe you huge for this." After hanging up, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, trying to figure out how I was going to handle this. Derek and I hadn't spoken since the day I discovered his affair, except through our lawyers. The idea of standing up in front of 200 people and pretending to be a happily married couple felt impossible. But I couldn't destroy Madison's perfect day. She deserved her moment of joy, her celebration of love and commitment. My problems could wait one more evening. I called Derek from the parking garage. "We need to talk," I said when he answered. "Cynthia, my lawyer said, this isn't about the divorce. It's about Madison's party tonight. We're expected to give a toast together." Silence on the other end of the line. "I know this is difficult," I continued, "but I won't ruin my sister's engagement party because of our personal issues. Can we agree to put on a good show for one night?" "Of course," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "I'll pick you up at 6. I'll meet you there. We can coordinate our remarks when you arrive." That afternoon, I spent an hour getting ready with unusual care. I chose an emerald green dress that I knew photographed well, had my hair styled at the salon, and applied makeup with the precision of someone preparing for battle. If this was going to be my last performance as Derek's wife, I was going to make it flawless. The Riverside Country Club looked spectacular. Madison had worked with the event planner for months to create a sophisticated garden party atmosphere. White roses and peonies adorned every table, strings of lights created a canopy over the outdoor terrace, and the late May weather had cooperated with a perfect 70-degree evening. I arrived early to help with any last-minute details. Madison looked radiant in a flowing pink dress that she'd designed herself, her blonde hair swept up in an elegant chignon that showcased the antique pearl earrings our grandmother had left her. "You look amazing," I told her, meaning it completely. "So do you. That green is perfect for you. Derek's going to lose his mind when he sees you." I forced a smile and busied myself with adjusting flower arrangements. Tyler's family had driven down from Boston, his parents, 2 brothers, an aunt and uncle, and various cousins. They were warm, genuine people who clearly adored Madison. Tyler's mother, Carol, pulled me aside during cocktail hour. "Madison talks about you all the time," she said, "how you've been like a second mother to her, how you and Derek have shown her what a strong marriage looks like. Tyler is so grateful to be joining a family with such wonderful values." Each word felt like a physical blow, but I nodded and smiled and played my part. Derek arrived at 7:30, looking handsome in his navy suit and silver tie. For a moment, seeing him across the crowded terrace, I could almost remember why I'd fallen in love with him 8 years ago. He was charming and confident, working the room with the ease of someone who'd spent his entire life at events like this. When he reached me, he leaned in to kiss my cheek, a gesture that would look natural to anyone watching. "You look beautiful," he murmured, and for a split second, I almost believed he meant it. "We need to keep this simple," I said quietly. "Standard toast about love and commitment, nothing personal." "Agreed." For the next hour, we moved through the party as a unit. Derek's hand rested on the small of my back as we chatted with guests. We laughed at the same jokes, shared knowing glances across conversations, and generally performed the role of devoted couple with Academy Award-worthy precision. I was actually starting to relax, thinking we might pull this off without incident, when I noticed my mother standing near the microphone with Tyler's father, deep in conversation. Eleanor had been unusually quiet all evening, which should have been my first warning sign. My mother was never quiet at social events. As the dinner wound down and people began gathering for the toasts, Eleanor stepped up to the microphone. Madison and Tyler stood nearby, glowing with happiness, surrounded by their wedding party and closest friends. "Good evening, everyone," Eleanor began, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was about to make an announcement. "Before we hear from the happy couple, I have something I'd like to share." I felt Derek tense beside me, but I wasn't worried yet. My mother loved being the center of attention at family events. She'd probably prepared some sentimental speech about watching Madison grow up, or some story about how she'd known Tyler was the one from the moment they met. "As many of you know," Eleanor continued, "I've always believed in the importance of honesty and transparency in our family." That's when I saw them. 3 men in expensive suits standing at the edge of the crowd near the entrance to the club. They weren't guests. I knew everyone who'd been invited. They were watching my mother with the attention of people who were waiting for a specific cue. My blood turned to ice. "Which is why," Eleanor said, her eyes finding mine across the crowd, "I think it's time everyone knew the truth about what's been happening in our family." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. 3 weeks ago, I hired a private investigator to look into some concerns I had about my eldest daughter's marriage. The crowd stirred uneasily. Madison's face went white. Tyler reached for her hand. Derek whispered, "Oh shit," under his breath. And I realized that my mother was about to destroy my life in front of 200 people, including 3 lawyers who were apparently here to witness whatever was about to unfold. Eleanor smiled at me across the silent crowd, and I saw something in her expression I'd never seen before. Not disappointment or anger, but something much worse. Satisfaction. "The photographs in this envelope," Eleanor announced, holding up the manila folder like evidence in a courtroom, "were taken by Harrison Investigative Services over the past 3 weeks." My legs felt like they might give out beneath me. Harrison Investigative Services was the most elite private investigation firm in Connecticut, the kind that catered to wealthy families who needed discreet information gathering. They were expensive, thorough, and ruthlessly effective. "Mother, what are you doing?" I managed to say, my voice barely carrying across the suddenly silent terrace. Eleanor's smile never wavered. I'm protecting our family's reputation, darling, something you clearly have no interest in doing. She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of 8 by 10 photographs, holding them up so the crowd could see they existed without revealing their contents. These show my daughter's husband, Derek Morrison, entering and leaving the Meridian Hotel on 14 separate occasions over the past 8 months, always with the same young woman, always during hours when he claimed to be in business meetings. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Madison grabbed Tyler's arm, her face a mask of horror and confusion. Tyler's family looked like they'd been physically struck. This wasn't the kind of drama they'd expected at an engagement party. Derek stepped forward, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Mrs. Hartwell, this is completely inappropriate. Whatever issues Cynthia and I may have should be handled privately." "Oh, but Derek," Eleanor said sweetly, "you forfeited your right to privacy the moment you decided to humiliate my daughter publicly." Publicly? I stared at my mother, trying to understand what she meant. Derek and I had kept our separation completely secret. Eleanor turned to address the crowd again. "What most of you don't know is that Derek has been telling people around town that Cynthia is mentally unstable, that she's become paranoid and delusional, making up stories about his faithfulness because she's unable to handle the pressures of marriage life." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I turned to look at Derek, whose face had gone completely white. "He's been laying the groundwork," Eleanor continued, "to make her look like an unreliable witness in their upcoming divorce proceedings. He's been telling his colleagues, his golf partners, even members of this very club, that Cynthia has been acting erratically, creating drama where none exists." I felt the eyes of every guest on me, some sympathetic, others curious, a few clearly enjoying the spectacle. Mrs. Patterson from the hospital board looked particularly smug. She'd never liked me, always felt I was too young to be chairing the Literacy Foundation. "That's not true," Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" Eleanor pulled out her phone and pressed play on a recording. Derek's voice filled the silence, tinny but unmistakable through the small speaker. "I don't know what's gotten into Cynthia lately. She's been so paranoid, accusing me of things that never happened. Honestly, I'm worried about her mental health. She's been checking my phone, following me to work, making these wild accusations about other women. It's like she's lost touch with reality." The recording continued for another 30 seconds, Derek's voice painting a picture of a delusional, unstable wife who couldn't be trusted to tell the truth about anything. "This conversation," Eleanor announced, "took place at the Greenwich Country Club bar last Tuesday. Derek was talking to Robert Callahan and James Mitchell, both of whom are here tonight." I found Robert and James in the crowd. Both men looked mortified, unable to meet my eyes. Madison finally found her voice. "Mom, how did you record that conversation? Robert Callahan is married to my dear friend Susan. Susan was sitting at the next table, and she called me immediately after overhearing Derek's performance." Eleanor's voice dripped with satisfaction. "Susan has been recording Derek's character assassination campaign for the past 2 weeks. We have 7 hours of audio from 3 different locations." Derek's lawyer must have coached him on this strategy. Paint Cynthia as mentally unstable, unreliable, prone to hysteria. Make everyone question her version of events before she even had a chance to tell them. It was sophisticated, calculated, and utterly ruthless. "So you see," Eleanor continued, addressing the crowd like she was delivering a closing argument, "when I learned that my daughter was planning to quietly divorce her cheating husband, and that same husband was systematically destroying her reputation to gain advantage in their settlement, I decided that the truth needed to come out properly." She gestured to the 3 men in suits who had moved closer to the front of the crowd. "These gentlemen are attorneys representing both my daughter and the Harrison investigative firm. They're here tonight as witnesses to ensure that Derek can never claim this evidence was fabricated or obtained illegally." My mind reeled as I tried to process what was happening. My mother had hired private investigators. She'd been recording Derek's conversations. She'd brought lawyers to my sister's engagement party. And she'd orchestrated this entire revelation as some kind of public trial. I never wanted this to be public, I said, my voice shaking. This was supposed to be Madison's night. Eleanor turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not maternal, not protective, but something closer to strategic calculation. Darling, Derek made it public the moment he started spreading lies about your mental health. Did you really think you could handle a man like him quietly? He would have destroyed you in court, turned all your friends against you, made you look like an unstable woman who couldn't handle reality. Tyler's mother, Carol, stepped forward hesitantly. I'm so sorry, Cynthia. We had no idea you were going through this. None of us did, said Mrs. Patterson, and I realized the smugness I'd seen in her expression wasn't directed at me, but at Derek. Derek told us you were having problems, but he made it sound like you were imagining things. How many people, I asked Derek directly, how many people did you tell that I was losing my mind? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The calculation in his eyes was almost worse than the original betrayal. He'd been planning this character assassination for weeks, maybe months. Every person he'd talked to, every seed of doubt he'd planted about my stability, it had all been building toward making me look like an unreliable narrator of my own life. The prenup you signed, Eleanor said, pulling out another document, becomes void if Derek is found to have committed adultery, but only if it can be proven in court. Derek's strategy was to make you look so unstable that no judge would believe your version of events, even with evidence. One of the lawyers stepped forward. Mrs. Morrison, I'm Jonathan Pierce from Patterson, Locke & Associates. We've been retained to represent you in this matter. Your mother has provided us with extensive documentation of your husband's infidelity and his attempts to discredit you publicly. Derek's lawyer, because of course he was here too, I realized, spotting Martin Webb near the bar, moved toward our group. This is highly irregular, a private family matter being aired in public like this. Nothing about this is private anymore, Eleanor said sharply. Derek made sure of that when he decided to wage a public relations campaign against my daughter. Madison had been silent through this entire exchange, but now she stepped up to the microphone, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Tyler and I are going to continue our celebration inside, she announced to the crowd. This is obviously a family matter that needs to be resolved privately. Thank you all for being here tonight, and please enjoy the rest of the evening. It was a graceful way to handle an impossible situation, and I felt a surge of pride for my sister's composure under pressure. As guests began filing inside, murmuring among themselves, Eleanor approached me with the lawyers in tow. Now, she said, her voice all business, let's discuss how we're going to handle Derek's settlement demands, because after tonight, I think his negotiating position has changed considerably. I looked around the nearly empty terrace, just family, lawyers, and Derek standing alone by the bar, his face a mask of defeat and rage. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. The club's private dining room had been hastily converted into a war room. Eleanor had somehow convinced the manager to let us use the space for what she diplomatically called urgent family business. The mahogany table was now covered with legal documents, photographs, and Jonathan Pierce's laptop displaying what appeared to be a very detailed timeline. Derek sat across from me, flanked by his lawyer, Martin Webb, and another man I didn't recognize, someone Martin had called in after the public revelation. Derek's confidence from earlier in the evening had evaporated completely. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of his exposed schemes. Before we discuss settlement terms, Jonathan said, opening a thick folder, there are some additional matters that came to light during our investigation that Mrs. Hartwell Sr. felt you should know about. I glanced at my mother, who was sitting ramrod straight in her chair with the satisfied expression of a chess master who just announced checkmate. What kind of additional matters? Eleanor nodded to Jonathan, who pulled out a different set of documents. Your husband has been systematically liquidating joint assets for the past 6 months. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger automatic notifications, but significant when combined. What does that mean exactly? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. He's been moving money out of your joint accounts, your investment portfolios, even borrowing against your home equity line without your knowledge.
All told, approximately $340,000 has been redirected into accounts you don't have access to. The number hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. I review our financial statements every month.
Martin Webb shifted uncomfortably. Those statements were modified versions. Derek's firm has been sending you edited reports that hid the transactions. I stared at Derek in disbelief. You've been stealing from me for 6 months? It's not stealing, Derek said defensively. It's marital property. I was protecting our assets in case. In case what? Eleanor's voice could have cut glass. In case your plan to destroy my daughter's credibility didn't work? Jonathan laid out a series of bank statements. Mr. Morrison opened 3 separate accounts in his name only, one at Chase Manhattan, one at Wells Fargo, and one at a private banking firm in the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands? I couldn't hide my shock. Derek, what the hell were you planning? The offshore account, Jonathan continued, was opened 8 months ago, the same time frame as when his relationship with Jessica Chen began. Eleanor leaned forward. Tell her about the life insurance policy, Mr. Pierce. Jonathan hesitated. Mrs. Morrison, 3 months ago, your husband took out a $2 million life insurance policy on you through his company's benefits program. He listed himself as the sole beneficiary. The room went completely silent. Even Martin Webb looked uncomfortable with this revelation. That's standard for married couples. Tax advantages, estate planning. You didn't tell me about it, I said quietly. Every other insurance policy we have, we discussed. The house, the cars, our health insurance changes. You never mentioned a $2 million policy on my life. It was part of an employee benefits package. No, it wasn't. Jonathan consulted his notes. Morrison & Associates doesn't offer spousal life insurance as part of their standard benefits. This was a private policy that Mr. Morrison purchased separately and has been paying for personally. Eleanor stood up and walked to the window overlooking the club's golf course. When the private investigator started digging into Derek's finances, we found some very interesting patterns. The offshore account, the life insurance policy, and several very specific Google searches on his work computer. What kind of searches? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. How to prove mental incompetence in divorce proceedings. How to have someone committed involuntarily. Symptoms of early onset dementia in women under 40. Eleanor turned back to face the room. And most disturbing of all, he researched accidental death clauses in life insurance policies. Derek shot to his feet. This is insane. You're making me sound like some kind of criminal mastermind. I was researching options for our marriage problems. Were you researching marriage problems when you looked up undetectable poisons and how long before a missing person is declared dead? Eleanor's voice was deadly calm. The room felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of it. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to process what I was hearing. Those searches were for a crime novel I was reading, Derek said, but his voice lacked any conviction. What crime novel? Jonathan asked. Because we checked your recent purchases, your library records, even your Kindle downloads. No crime novels, no mystery books, nothing that would explain those search terms. Martin Webb cleared his throat. I think we need to take a break and discuss. We're not taking a break, Eleanor said sharply. We're just getting started. She nodded to the third man who'd been standing quietly by the door. This is Detective Ray Summers from the Greenwich Police Department. He's been reviewing the evidence as a personal favor to a mutual friend. Detective Summers stepped forward, his expression professional but serious. Mrs. Morrison, based on what I've reviewed tonight, I strongly recommend that you file a report about the financial fraud. The pattern of behavior Mr. Pierce has documented suggests possible criminal intent beyond simple adultery. Criminal intent? I looked around the room, feeling like I was trapped in someone else's nightmare. You think Derek was planning to hurt me? The evidence is circumstantial, but the combination of factors is concerning. The financial transfers, the insurance policy, the search history, and most importantly, the systematic campaign to establish your mental instability, it creates a very troubling picture.
Derek's face had gone completely white. This is ridiculous. I'm a financial planner, not some criminal mastermind. Yes, I had an affair. Yes, I made some poor financial decisions. But I would never hurt Cynthia physically. Then explain the life insurance policy, Eleanor said. Explain why you needed $2 million in coverage on a woman you were planning to divorce. Explain why you were researching accidental death clauses while simultaneously trying to prove she was mentally unstable. Derek's new lawyer whispered something in his ear, but Derek shook his head. I want to explain this myself. He turned to me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the man I'd married 8 years ago. Cynthia, the insurance policy was Jessica's idea. She said that if something happened to you, I'd need financial security to start over. I didn't think about how it would look. Jessica told you to take out a life insurance policy on me? She was trying to be practical about our future together. We talked about what would happen if you had an accident or got sick. I never planned to hurt you, I swear. Jonathan and Eleanor exchanged a look that I couldn't interpret. Mr. Morrison, Jonathan said carefully, are you saying that Jessica Chen was involved in the financial planning of your extramarital relationship? She helped me figure out how to protect our assets, yes. She has a business degree. She understands investments. Derek, I interrupted, Jessica works as a hostess at an upscale restaurant. When did she get a business degree? The silence stretched uncomfortably. What restaurant does Jessica work at? Detective Summers asked. Derek hesitated. Le Bernard. She's in management. Jonathan was already typing on his laptop. After a few minutes, he looked up with a grim expression. There's no Jessica Chen employed at Le Bernard. In fact, there's no Jessica Chen matching the description and background details we have anywhere in the New York restaurant industry. Eleanor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Tell him about the reverse image search, Mr. Pierce. The photographs Derek provided of Jessica to his lawyer for the discovery process, we ran them through facial recognition software. The woman he's been calling Jessica Chen is actually someone named Rachel Torres. She's employed by a private investigation firm that specializes in corporate espionage and extramarital affairs. Derek's face went ashen. That's impossible. I met Jessica at a client dinner. We've been together for 8 months. You've been the target of a sophisticated con for 8 months, Eleanor corrected. The question is, who hired Rachel Torres to seduce you? Detective Summers leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, I think you need to consider the possibility that you've been manipulated by someone who wants to destroy your marriage and potentially harm your wife. Someone who knew exactly how to appeal to your weaknesses and guide you toward increasingly dangerous behavior. Derek sank back into his chair, the full weight of what he'd been told finally hitting him. The real question, Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, is who hated my daughter enough to orchestrate something this elaborate, and whether they're finished with their plan. Detective Summers opened a new folder, this one marked with an official police evidence seal. Mrs. Morrison, we need to discuss your foundation, specifically the Hartford Children's Literacy Foundation you established 3 years ago. I blinked in confusion. What does my foundation have to do with any of this? More than you might think, Eleanor said grimly. Tell her about the board meeting minutes, Detective. Summers pulled out a transcript. 6 months ago, your foundation board held a meeting to discuss a potential merger with the Metropolitan Children's Education Trust. Do you remember that meeting? Of course. The merger would have doubled our funding and reach. It was my biggest professional achievement. The memory was bittersweet now. I'd been so excited to tell Derek about it, but he'd barely listened, claiming he was distracted by work stress. But the deal fell through at the last minute. Some kind of financial irregularity was discovered. What kind of irregularity? Jonathan asked. The trust found discrepancies in our accounting, missing documentation for some of our larger donations. Our board chair, Victoria Ashford, said it was probably just poor record keeping, but the trust pulled out to avoid any potential liability. Mrs. Morrison, Summers continued, Victoria Ashford is Derek's first cousin. Did you know that? My blood went cold. That's impossible. Derek would have told me if Victoria was his cousin. I've known her for 3 years.
Different last names, Jonathan explained, consulting his notes. Victoria Ashford was born Victoria Morrison. She's Derek's father's brother's daughter. She married Richard Ashford 12 years ago. I tried to process this information. Victoria had been the one who'd recommended me for several board positions around town. She'd been instrumental in helping me establish the foundation's credibility with other donors. She'd become one of my closest professional allies. There's more, Eleanor said. Victoria was the one who suggested Derek's firm handle the foundation's investment portfolio. She was also the one who recommended the accounting firm that discovered the discrepancies that destroyed the merger. You're saying Victoria sabotaged my foundation? We're saying Victoria orchestrated the entire situation. The accounting irregularities were fabricated, the missing documentation was deliberately destroyed, and the merger failure was designed to financially weaken your foundation at the exact same time Derek was moving money out of your personal accounts. Jonathan opened his laptop again. We traced the payments to Rachel Torres. They didn't come from Derek. They came from a shell company registered to VA Enterprises, Victoria Ashford's private consulting business. The room was spinning. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to anchor myself to something solid. Why would Victoria want to destroy my foundation? And why would she hire someone to seduce my husband? Because, Eleanor said, her voice filled with quiet fury, Victoria Ashford was in line to inherit a substantial trust fund from her grandfather, Derek's grandfather, but only if she could prove that Derek was unfit to manage family assets. Detective Summers pulled out another document. The Morrison Family Trust is worth approximately $15 million. It was supposed to pass to Derek when he turned 35, which happened last year. But the trust has a morality clause. If Derek is found to be of poor moral character or financially irresponsible, the inheritance passes to the next heir in line. Victoria, I whispered. Victoria, Eleanor confirmed. But simply proving Derek had an affair wouldn't be enough to trigger the morality clause. She needed him to commit more serious infractions, financial fraud, potentially even criminal behavior. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. So she hired Rachel to seduce Derek, then guided him toward increasingly illegal activities. The life insurance policy, the hidden assets, the attempts to have you declared mentally incompetent, all of it would constitute the kind of poor moral character needed to void Derek's inheritance, Jonathan explained. Victoria was planning to present evidence of Derek's behavior to the trust administrators after your divorce was finalized. Derek, who had been silent through this entire revelation, finally spoke up. Victoria helped me plan the financial transfers. She said it was standard practice in contentious divorces. She recommended the offshore accounts. She suggested the insurance policy. She even gave me the name of the private investigator who was supposed to help document Cynthia's instability. The same investigator your mother-in-law used to expose your affair, Detective Summers noted. Harrison Investigative Services works for whoever pays them the most. When Mrs. Hartwell hired them to investigate you, they were already being paid by Victoria to help frame you. Eleanor smiled grimly. When I called Harrison to hire them, they told me someone was already paying them to investigate Derek's activities. They offered to provide me with everything they'd already gathered, plus whatever additional information I needed. It was remarkably efficient. You knew about Victoria from the beginning? I asked my mother. I suspected. Victoria was too eager to help with damage control when rumors about Derek's affair started circulating. She kept suggesting strategies that would make you look unstable while making Derek look like the victim. It didn't feel like genuine family loyalty. Derek buried his face in his hands. Jessica, Rachel, she knew everything about the trust. She knew about the morality clause. She knew about the inheritance timeline. She said she wanted to help me secure our future together, but she was setting me up the entire time. The question now, Detective Summers said, is how far Victoria was planning to take this. The internet searches about accidental death and undetectable poisons suggest the plan might have escalated beyond just financial fraud. I felt sick. You think Victoria was planning to have me killed? We think Victoria was planning to guide Derek toward a situation where your death would look like either suicide or an accident caused by your supposed mental instability.
The life insurance money would have been split between Derek and Victoria through their family trust, and Derek would have been so implicated in your death that he'd never be able to claim his inheritance, leaving Victoria as the sole heir to $15 million, Jonathan added.
The magnitude of the conspiracy was staggering. Victoria had spent months, possibly years, planning this elaborate scheme. She'd infiltrated my professional life, gained my trust, sabotaged my foundation, hired someone to seduce and manipulate my husband, and potentially planned my murder, all to steal an inheritance that legally belonged to Derek. "Where is Victoria now?" I asked. Detective Summers checked his phone. "That's actually why I'm here tonight. We've been monitoring her communications since this afternoon. About an hour ago, she received a call from someone warning her that her plan had been exposed. She's currently at Westchester County Airport, attempting to board a private jet to a non-extradition country." "Who warned her?" Derek asked. "That's what we're trying to figure out. Someone at this party tonight knows more than they're letting on," Eleanor said, looking around the room suspiciously. Jonathan was typing rapidly on his laptop. "I'm getting updates from the FBI team at the airport. Victoria's been detained, but she's demanding to speak with her lawyer before answering any questions." "What lawyer?" Derek asked. Detective Summers looked directly at Martin Webb, who had been unusually quiet for the past 20 minutes. "Mr. Webb," Summers said, "you've been representing both Derek and Victoria in various legal matters for the past year, haven't you?" Martin's face went pale. Attorney-client privilege prevents me from—" "Attorney-client privilege doesn't cover criminal conspiracy," Eleanor said sharply. "How long have you been helping Victoria frame my son-in-law?" The silence stretched uncomfortably as Martin Webb realized his legal career was about to implode along with Victoria's inheritance scheme. "I think," Detective Summers said, standing up and pulling out his handcuffs, "we need to continue this conversation at the police station. Mr. Webb, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and accessory to attempted murder." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Martin finally spoke. "Victoria promised me a partnership in her new law firm after she inherited the trust money. I never thought it would go this far. I never thought anyone would actually get hurt." But I wasn't listening to his justifications anymore. I was thinking about something Detective Summers had said earlier. Someone at the party had warned Victoria that her plan was exposed. Someone who was still here, still pretending to be my ally, still waiting for another opportunity to finish what Victoria had started. Detective Summers finished reading Martin Webb his rights and handed him over to two uniformed officers who had quietly entered through the club's back entrance. As they escorted the disgraced lawyer out, Jonathan was already pulling up phone records on his laptop. "The call to Victoria came from a burner phone purchased yesterday at an electronics store in Stamford," he announced, "but the store's security cameras show who bought it." Eleanor moved closer to look at the laptop screen. Her face went completely white. "What is it, Mom?" I asked, but she was staring at the screen like she'd seen a ghost. "Show them," Detective Summers said quietly. Jonathan turned the laptop so Derek and I could see the security footage. The timestamp showed yesterday afternoon, 3:47. A woman in sunglasses and a baseball cap was purchasing a prepaid cell phone and a calling card. She kept her head down, but when she looked up to hand cash to the cashier, her face was clearly visible. Madison. My sister, my baby sister, who I'd protected and supported my entire life. Madison, whose engagement party had been ruined by this revelation. Madison, who had handled the public humiliation with such grace and dignity. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Madison didn't even know about the investigation until tonight." Eleanor's voice was hollow. "She's known for weeks, Cynthia. She's the one who told me about Derek's affair in the first place." The room felt like it was tilting on its axis. "What?" "Madison came to me 6 weeks ago. She said she'd seen Derek at a restaurant with another woman, that they were holding hands and looked very intimate. She was devastated for you and said she didn't know how to tell you without destroying your marriage." "So you hired the private investigator because Madison told you Derek was cheating?" "That's what I thought I was doing," Eleanor said, her voice breaking slightly.
But now I understand that Madison was manipulating me into starting an investigation that would expose Victoria's conspiracy at exactly the right moment. Detective Summers consulted his notes. We traced Madison's financial records going back 2 years. She's been receiving monthly payments of $5,000 from VA Enterprises, the same shell company that was paying Rachel Torres. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Madison was working with Victoria? Your sister has been feeding Victoria information about your foundation, your marriage, your daily routines, everything Victoria needed to orchestrate this scheme, Jonathan explained. Madison was Victoria's inside source in the family. Derek looked as stunned as I felt, but Madison always seemed to love Cynthia. She was always calling, always wanting to spend time together. Because Victoria needed detailed intelligence, Detective Summers said, Madison's job was to stay close to Cynthia, monitor her emotional state, report on any suspicions she might have about Derek's behavior, and manipulate family dynamics when necessary. I thought back over the past year, remembering dozens of conversations with Madison, how she'd always asked probing questions about my marriage, how she'd been so supportive when I'd mentioned Derek seemed distant, how she'd encouraged me to focus on my foundation work while Derek was, quote, going through a stressful period at the office. The engagement, I said suddenly, was that real or was not part of the plan, too? Eleanor pulled out her phone and showed me a text message thread. Tyler Brennan doesn't exist. The man Madison introduced as her fiancé is actually an actor named Kevin Sullivan. He's been paid $50,000 to play the role of Madison's devoted boyfriend for the past 8 months. I stared at the private investigator's report on Eleanor's phone. Kevin Sullivan, 29, graduate of Yale Drama School, recently appeared in off-Broadway productions of The Tempest and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. No connection to any Brennan family in Boston. The engagement party, I whispered. This whole thing was designed to get all the key players in one room where Victoria's plan could be exposed publicly. Madison convinced me to hire the investigators, Eleanor said. She suggested bringing lawyers to the party as witnesses. She even recommended that I make the revelation public instead of handling it privately. I thought she was trying to protect you from Derek's manipulation, but she was actually orchestrating Victoria's downfall. Detective Summers leaned forward. Mrs. Morrison, your sister has been playing a very sophisticated double game. She was working for Victoria, but she was also positioning herself to benefit when Victoria's plan collapsed. How?
Jonathan pulled up another set of financial documents. Madison has been secretly recording her conversations with Victoria for months. She has evidence of Victoria's entire conspiracy, including detailed plans for your murder disguised as suicide. Madison was planning to sell this evidence to the FBI and claim the reward money for exposing a murder-for-hire plot. The scope of my sister's betrayal was breathtaking. She hadn't just been working with Victoria, she'd been planning to profit from exposing Victoria while simultaneously destroying my marriage and potentially my life. "Where is Madison now?" I asked. Before anyone could answer, the dining room door opened and Madison walked in, still wearing her pink engagement dress, but without the radiant smile she'd maintained all evening. Tyler, Kevin, was nowhere to be seen. "I heard they arrested Martin Webb," she said calmly. "I assume that means Victoria's plan has been fully exposed." Eleanor stood up slowly. "Madison, how could you do this to your sister?" Madison looked directly at me, and for the first time I saw something cold and calculating in her expression that I'd never noticed before. "Do you want to know the truth, Cynthia? The real truth?" "I think I've heard enough truth for one evening." "No, you haven't." Madison sat down across from me, her posture relaxed despite the roomful of law enforcement officers. "You want to know why I helped Victoria? Because I've spent my entire life watching you get everything handed to you while I got nothing." The venom in her voice was shocking. "Madison, that's not... You were the perfect daughter, the one who married well, who started a successful foundation, who made mom and dad proud at every family gathering. Do you know what it's like to be introduced as Madison, Cynthia's artistic sister, at every social event for 25 years? Eleanor stepped forward. Madison, your father and I have always been proud of both. Stop lying, Mom. You've been disappointed in me since I was 16 and told you I wanted to study art instead of business. You've been waiting for me to settle down with a nice young man like Cynthia did. You've never seen me as anything more than the daughter who didn't live up to her potential. Derek, who had been silent through this family confrontation, finally spoke up. Madison, I'm sorry you felt overlooked, but that doesn't justify. Justify what? Exposing the fact that you're a cheating, lying, potentially murderous fraud? You should be thanking me. If I hadn't orchestrated this revelation, you'd be facing murder charges within 6 months when Victoria's plan reached its conclusion. Detective Summers was recording everything on his phone. Miss Hartwell, are you confessing to conspiracy to commit fraud? Madison laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. I'm confessing to saving my sister's life. Victoria was planning to have Cynthia killed and Derek framed for it. I exposed the plot before anyone got seriously hurt. If anything, I should get a citizen's commendation. You've been taking money from Victoria for 2 years, I said. You helped her infiltrate my foundation and destroy the merger that would have helped thousands of children. I took Victoria's money and used it to document her crimes. Every conversation, every planning session, every detail of her conspiracy to steal Derek's inheritance, I recorded all of it. I have enough evidence to put Victoria away for life. Jonathan looked up from his laptop. The FBI just confirmed that Victoria is cooperating with their investigation. She's provided detailed testimony about the murder plot in exchange for a reduced sentence. She specifically named Madison as an unwilling participant who was trying to protect you. Madison smiled smugly. Victoria doesn't know about the recordings. She thinks I was just her naive accomplice. She has no idea I've been building a case against her for months. Eleanor sank back into her chair. Madison, you put your sister's life at risk for money and revenge. I put my sister's life to save it, Madison corrected. If I hadn't been feeding Victoria information, someone else would have. At least this way, I could control the situation and make sure Cynthia survived. Detective Summers closed his notepad. Miss Hartwell, you'll need to come with us for questioning. The district attorney will decide whether to charge you as an accomplice or grant you immunity in exchange for your cooperation. Madison laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. I'm confessing to saving my sister's life. Victoria was planning to have Cynthia killed and Derek framed for it. I exposed the plot before anyone got seriously hurt. If anything, I should get a citizen's commendation. You've been taking money from Victoria for 2 years, I said. You helped her infiltrate my foundation and destroy the merger that would have helped thousands of children. I took Victoria's money and used it to document her crimes. Every conversation, every planning session, every detail of her conspiracy to steal Derek's inheritance, I recorded all of it. I have enough evidence to put Victoria away for life. Jonathan looked up from his laptop. The FBI just confirmed that Victoria is cooperating with their investigation. She's provided detailed testimony about the murder plot in exchange for a reduced sentence. She specifically named Madison as an unwilling participant who was trying to protect you. Madison smiled smugly. Victoria doesn't know about the recordings. She thinks I was just her naive accomplice. She has no idea I've been building a case against her for months. Eleanor sank back into her chair. Madison, you put your sister's life at risk for money and revenge. I put my sister's life to save it, Madison corrected. If I hadn't been feeding Victoria information, someone else would have. At least this way, I could control the situation and make sure Cynthia survived. Detective Summers closed his notepad. Miss Hartwell, you'll need to come with us for questioning. The district attorney will decide whether to charge you as an accomplice or grant you immunity in exchange for your cooperation. As 2 officers moved to escort Madison out, she stopped next to my chair. For what it's worth, Cynthia, I never wanted you to get hurt. I just wanted to matter as much as you do. After Madison was led away, the dining room felt eerily quiet. Derek, Eleanor, Jonathan, Detective Summers, and I sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything that had been revealed. What happens now? Derek asked finally. Jonathan gathered his papers. Now you get divorced quietly, Derek keeps his inheritance since he was manipulated rather than acting independently, and you both try to rebuild your lives. Eleanor looked at me with tears in her eyes. Cynthia, I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting you, but I was being manipulated just like everyone else. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the golf course where Madison and I had played as children, where she'd always let me win at mini-golf because she said it made me happy. Detective Summers, I said without turning around, when you charge Madison, I want to be sure she gets credit for exposing Victoria's plan. Whatever her motives were, she did save my life. Even after everything she did to you, I thought about my sister, brilliant and artistic and desperate to be seen as more than just Cynthia's little sister. I thought about the choice between forgiveness and justice, between family loyalty and personal betrayal. She's still my sister, I said finally, and despite everything, I think she was telling the truth about trying to protect me in the end. Derek joined me at the window. So what do we do now? I looked at my soon-to-be ex-husband, this man I'd shared 8 years with, who'd been manipulated into nearly destroying both of us. Now we figure out how to start over, I said. 6 months later, I was standing in the lobby of the newly renovated Hartford Children's Literacy Foundation building, watching volunteers set up for our grand reopening celebration. The foundation had not only survived Victoria's sabotage, but had emerged stronger than ever. The FBI's investigation had attracted national attention, and donations had poured in from across the country. Derek and I had finalized our divorce 3 months earlier. To everyone's surprise, it had been remarkably amicable. The revelation that he'd been systematically manipulated by professionals changed how I viewed his betrayal. He was still responsible for his choices, but understanding the sophisticated nature of the conspiracy made forgiveness possible.
Derek had kept his inheritance after Victoria's conviction for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. He'd used part of the money to establish a victims fund for people who'd been targeted by similar elaborate scams. We'd even collaborated on the foundation's new security protocols to prevent future infiltration. Madison had received immunity in exchange for her testimony against Victoria and the evidence she'd collected. She was currently serving 500 hours of community service and attending weekly therapy sessions. We talked every 2 weeks, careful, cautious conversations as we slowly rebuilt our relationship. It would take time, but we were both committed to healing the damage. Victoria Ashford was serving 15 years in federal prison. Martin Webb had been disbarred and was serving 5 years for his role in the conspiracy. Rachel Torres, the woman who'd posed as Jessica Chen, had received 3 years in exchange for testifying against her employers. Eleanor had taken the revelations about Madison the hardest. She'd thrown herself into therapy and family counseling, determined to understand how she'd failed to see the dynamics that had driven Madison to such desperate measures. Our monthly family dinners had resumed, but they were different now, more honest, less performative. As I watched the volunteers arranging books on shelves and setting up reading corners for children, my phone buzzed with a text message. Looking forward to seeing the new space tonight, Jonathan. Jonathan Pierce had become more than just my lawyer over the past 6 months. What had started as professional collaboration had gradually developed into something deeper. He was kind, honest, and had seen me at my absolute worst without judgment. We were taking things slowly, but I was optimistic about the possibilities. Another text came in, this one from Madison. Proud of you for tonight. I wish I could be there. Love you, sis. Madison was still banned from attending foundation events as part of her community service restrictions, but she'd been helping with our social media outreach from behind the scenes. Her artistic eye had been invaluable in redesigning our marketing materials. The final text was from Derek. Hope tonight goes perfectly. You've built something amazing. Derek had started dating again, an elementary school teacher named Lisa, who shared his love of hiking and had no connection to Connecticut's social elite. I was genuinely happy for him. As I prepared to address the crowd of donors, volunteers, and community members gathering for our reopening, I reflected on how completely my life had changed. A year ago, I'd been living in a carefully constructed facade, married to a man I'd grown apart from, blind to the conspiracy swirling around me. Now, I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. The foundation was thriving, I had new relationships built on honesty rather than social expectations, and I'd learned to trust my own instincts instead of constantly seeking approval from others. Patricia Whitfield, my divorce attorney, approached with a glass of champagne. "You clean up nice for someone who's been through hell and back," I said, accepting the glass. "Any regrets about how everything played out?" I looked around the room at the children already curled up with books in our new reading nooks, at the volunteers who'd believed in our mission enough to stay through the scandal, at the donors who doubled their contributions after learning about our story. "You know what?" I said, raising my champagne glass. "I think this is exactly where I was supposed to end up." As the evening got underway and I stepped up to the podium to address our supporters, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I was living authentically. No more perfect facades, no more performing for other people's expectations, no more pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. The truth, even when it was devastating, had ultimately set me free. And that was a foundation worth building on. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.